This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Mali's former president Ibrahim Boubacar Keita dies in Bamako. Somali government spokesperson survives a suicide bombing attack. And the uphill task of administering booster shots of COVID-19 vaccines on the continent. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up, pro-civilian rule group gives its demands after agreeing to participate in UN-led mediation efforts in Sudan. And in sports, AFCON debutants Gambia hold Mali to a 1-1 draw in Group F to keep both in the race for the last 16. We begin in Mali, where ousted President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita has died at the age of 76. Family members say Keita passed on Sunday morning in his home in the capital Bamako. The cause of Keita's death was not given. Keita led Mali from September 2013 to August 2020. He was forced out by a military coup after months of anti-government protests. Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, at least 10 civilians have been killed in an attack in the northern part of the country. Unidentified armed individuals struck in the village of Namsiguian in Bam province on Saturday. Shops and businesses in the village were set alight. Suspected militants are believed to be behind the attack. Islamic militants have inflicted heavy casualties during a 4-year insurgency. Elsewhere in Somalia, local media is reporting that government spokesperson Mohamed Ibrahim Mualimu is in stable condition in hospital. Mualimu was wounded in an explosion in the capital, Mogadishu. A suicide bomber from militant group Al-Shabaab targeted his vehicle. Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble has called the bombing an odious terrorist attack. Mohamed Kahie has more now from Mogadishu.
Of the Prime Minister, just a statement from the Office of the Prime Minister has confirmed that the spokesman of the government, Mohamed Ibrahim Mualimu, was wounded in that attack claimed by armed group Al-Shabaab and is now nursing his wound in one of the hospitals in capital Mogadishu. And they say that his injuries is not life-threatening. Al-Shabaab has claimed the responsibility of this attack, saying that the target of this particular explosion was targeted. And also the police say that this particular attack happened at Dabka Junction, which is a very intersection in the capital Mogadishu, where most of the attacks by Al-Shabaab happen in Mogadishu. So this latest attack is happening as the country is gearing up for the crucial parliamentary elections ahead of the presidential elections. And the AMISOM peacekeeping force, that is the African Union peacekeeping force in the country, with Somali security architecture, Somali security forces have beefed up the security across the country, and especially during the day you see a lot of patrols happening at the main busy social areas to preempt this kind of attacks in Somalia. And of course, Al-Shabaab is trying to steal the show during this electioneering period to carry out these attacks, that showing that it's still present and it can hit anytime, anywhere.
In Sudan, the pro-civilian faction has agreed to UN-brokered talks. The Forces of Freedom and Change are pushing a number of requirements to Volker Perthes, the head of the UN Special Mission in Khartoum. Perthes is heading the United Nations facilitated talks between the Sudanese military, opposition and civil society groups. The Forces of Freedom and Change hope dialogue will end the political deadlock following the October military coup. The group says it wants to end military rule and to see the country hold transparent elections.
Ending the revolutionary situation in Sudan and establishing new constitutional arrangements that restore the path of civil democratic transition. and establishing a full civil authority to lead the transitional period and prepare for the holding of free, fair and transparent elections at the end of transitional period.
The conditions that were set are certainly the same as negotiating ceilings, but it is certain that the vast majority of the people of Sudan and a very broad front are not affiliated with the forces of freedom and change. The exclusion of some or the rejection of some constitutes a veiled rejection of the initiative. They must deal positively with everyone.
Meanwhile, Sudan has recorded the first death of a security officer during anti-military protests. The officer was stabbed to death on Thursday, according to the country's police spokesperson. Astatal has more.
According to Sudan's police spokesperson, the unnamed police general was stabbed by a group of protesters. He was allegedly treating a colleague when the attack happened. Both officers had been working to secure the scene of the protest. The Forces of Freedom and Change has been repeatedly calling for protest following the October 25th military takeover. The group is distancing themselves from the events of Thursday's protest, reiterating its non-violent stance.
The enemies of the democratic transition are present in our regional and international surroundings and are not satisfied with any civilian-led transition in the country, nor are they satisfied by the revolution that has adhered to the peacefulness since 2018 until this moment.
The country is going through a period of political unrest. Experts fear the continued turmoil could lead to more violence.
The worst scenario, which we do not want, is for the country to go into complete chaos with a constant state of tension, and the protests may develop into violent protests as happened in some countries, and this leads to the outbreak of a civil war in Sudan.
Demonstrators continue to call for the military to step away from the country's transition process. Astatal, CGTN.
On to Tunisia now, where the country has launched a national consultation to draft a new constitution. The online platform will be open until March the 20th. Eligible topics include electoral, economic, social, health and education-related issues. Adnan Shawashi has those details.
On July 25, 2021, Tunisian President Said sacked the Prime Minister, froze Parliament and lifted MPs' immunity. He later appointed a new Prime Minister and called for changing the country's political system from parliamentary to presidential. Said said the e-dialogue with the population and the online consultation will determine the nature of the new political system in the country.
Tunisian youth can easily use the digital platform to make their voices heard. This online forum allows people to share their proposals, views and thoughts about the country's future, as well as its constitutional system, the new constitution and the electoral system. We will make this happen in a record period of time.
The national consultation is dubbed Your Opinion, Our Decision. It is targeting hundreds of youth centers through an electronic platform across the country. Some people have welcomed the initiative, while many others have criticized the project.
I will participate in the consultation, but I don't think my views will change anything. I'm not sure whether someone will read my comments and take my proposals into account, but I think everyone should contribute.
The online consultation does not respect the digital gap in Tunisia, as more than 40% of the population does not have access to the internet and cannot answer questions online. The questions are very superficial and do not take into consideration the current dangerous situation. The consultation is oriented in one direction. It paves the way for a presidential referendum next July.
Constitutional law experts explain that the national consultation is challenging technically and legally. In fact, Qais Said did not explain who will be in charge of sorting and filtering the online results. In the absence of parliament, Said also plans to appoint a group of experts who will draft the new constitution.
The president should not make the mistake of drafting the new constitution and the electoral law and approve it by experts he will designate. This scenario will pose many problems. The committee of experts should be made up of independent experts in different fields like history, philosophy, social sciences, and law in order to speak for the population instead of imposing the unilateral vision of the president.
The Minister of Communication Technology has declared that the national consultation includes 6 axes. Each axis contains 5 questions and a free space, allowing participants to express themselves freely on any topic. President Kais Saied has emphasized the importance of involving all Tunisians in the national dialogue. Several opposition parties have called for boycotting the online consultation, which they believe will serve the political agenda of the head of state. Abdel Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, let's revisit our top story in Mali, where ousted President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita has died at the age of 76. Family members say Keita passed on Sunday morning in his home in the capital Bamako. Nokutula Shabalala now takes a closer look at Ibrahim Boubacar Keita's tenure as Mali's president.
Ibrahim Boubacar Keita was known for his white flowing robes. Keita won a landslide victory in the 2013 elections. He vowed to take on corruption that eroded the support for his predecessor, Amadou Toumani Touré. His tenure was marred by a security crisis. Before he became president, Tuareg militants launched a rebellion to take over the northern part of the country in 2012. French forces had intervened in January 2013 to drive back the insurgents. But years later, the groups bounced back, killing hundreds of soldiers and civilians. And this became a defining feature of Keita's presidency. In 2018, he was re-elected for a second 5-year term. He campaigned as a unifying figure in his fractured country. But allegations of corruption, slow reforms, a crumbling economy and ethnic clashes fed anti-Keita sentiments. This sparked large protests by Malians in Bamako. Keita suffered a mini-stroke a month after he was forced out of office by the military in 2020. The former statesman was sent to the United Arab Emirates for treatment, and he wasn't seen in the public eye ever since. Nokutula Shabalala, CGTN.
Let's turn further afield now. The Chinese city of Tianjin is fighting the first Omicron outbreak on the country's mainland. It's been conducting citywide testing to identify the cases and cut the transmission link. But visiting testing sites in cold weather can be challenging for senior residents who've visited a community to see what's being done to help them.
Quite a touching scene here as Tianjin conducts a third round of mass testing. An old man in his 90s staggered to the testing site with somebody else's help. He was registered to be tested at home, but he still chose to come to the testing site.
The outbreak this time is still serious. The community workers and medics are working very hard. I don't want to cause them any inconvenience, so I go to testing sites if I can.
The number of senior residents in this community is rather high. Many of them come to the testing sites even if they can be tested at home. But there are those who can't.
Our community has 1,289 permanent senior residents, and over 200 households have registered to have their samples taken at home. But many of them still come to the site simply because they want to ease our burden. There are now about 50 households who can't do it.
And to help those in need, medics and community workers go to their homes to collect their samples.
The male resident is rather old and sits in a wheelchair. We took samples of 3 residents in his house.
We go to the testing site if we can. Actually, we put on our coats and I was about to take him out when you called.
Local officials say the goal is to reach 0 case in community level as early as possible, so the residents could spend a safe spring festival that is coming in just weeks. Ubin, CGTN, Tianjin.
Now, vaccine availability continues to be a major challenge for Africa as countries begin administering booster COVID-19 vaccine jabs to their populations. A majority of African countries failed to meet global vaccination targets for 2021, and the need to give a third dose is a new hurdle for many states. Enoxikolia reports.
At the Kenyan Ministry of Health Laboratories, Dr. John Kiru is leading a team of scientists carrying out DNA sequencing of COVID-19 viruses detected in samples collected. Their role is to identify variants circulating in the population and their characteristics.
Delta came, Delta was very severe. Omicron came, Omicron is spreading very fast, maybe not too severe. But now we don't know how the next variant will be.
Africa has already surpassed the 10 million mark for reported cases. And with the virus spreading fast, Dr. Kiru, who is coordinating Kenya's COVID-19 diagnostic services, says vaccination remains Africa's best weapon. But according to WHO Africa, the continent is struggling on this front.
As things stand, predictions are that if things continue like this, Africa may not reach the 70% vaccination coverage target until August 2024.
Then there is an emerging challenge, the need to give booster shots, with reports of waning immunity in vaccinated individuals. Some African countries like Kenya, Rwanda and South Africa have begun issuing the third jab to targeted members of the population.
What happens is that the amount of antibodies you have been producing start becoming fewer and fewer.
Working with the limited resources they have, African countries must now strike a balance between issuing boosters and rolling out new vaccinations.
We may even have to look at who were vaccinated first. So if you had been vaccinated more than 6 months ago, most likely you require a booster, and you are also in other categories you qualify. Probably you require a booster more than somebody who is of the same category like you but got a vaccination just recently.
WHO's Regional Director for Africa has, however, continued to lay emphasis on the need to have more people vaccinated.
If African countries get the doses and support necessary to vaccinate 70% of their populations, as is the case for many wealthy countries, we could avert tens of thousands of deaths from COVID-19.
Dr. Moiti says the world will only be safe if Africa and other low-income countries get vaccinated. Enoxikolia, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, it's time for us to take another short break. Let's take a quick look at what's coming up in the sport. AFCON debutants Gambia hold Mali to a 1-1 draw in Group F to keep both in the race for the last 16.